Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Mark Stenberg. I'm the senior media reporter at Adweek. I'm joined by some esteemed panelists today. We'll get to introductions in a second. As was mentioned, the subject of today's conversation is about podcast monetization, the ways in which that's changed. Specifically, we're going to be talking a lot about ads, but I think we're going to get also into a lot of other realms. Video introduction into podcasting has obviously been transformative. We're talking about creators, subscriptions, events, the whole nine yards. So to do that, I have three very smart, very plugged in podcast aficionados. So I'll let them introduce themselves. Billy, could we start with you?
Yeah, hi everybody. Billy Hartman with Art19. I'm the head of revenue, which means I look after supply acquisition and demand generation as part of Amazon and Amazon's DSP. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Maria?
I'm Maria Tullin. I oversee performance audio at Horizon Media, which means that I oversee about 50 brands that are excited about audio.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela Phillips, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pursuit Network. We support creators on all things building their entire brand. We specialize in podcasting, but also multi-channel distribution, helping all of our creators monetize.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a lot to get to today, so we will get right into it. Maria, I think we can start with you. The subject of the conversation is about the ways in which podcast monetization has shifted. That's a big conversation, but there's no other way to start it than just to get into it. Over the last several years, how would you characterize some of the primary ways in which podcast monetization has shifted from your perspective?
I think there's become a lot more excitement on the brand side and a lot more willingness to test and learn. So when we put together a strategy, we come at it full funnel. We're looking at everything from sponsorships to programmatic. So putting together, having clients be willing to actually accept a test and learn strategy versus let's just buy a couple of shows and see how it does, I think has been really transformative in having our brand see success and then double down.
Can I ask a question on that?
Please.
I'm curious. So what do you think brand advertisers, I understand D2C or DR advertisers already, fully embrace podcasts, but on the big brand side of the house, like yourself, are they starting to treat podcasts literally as its own standalone audio opportunity? Are they thinking like audio all up and like podcast is a part of that? Or do you think it's really starting to kind of become its own, beast?
I would say 10 years ago when we started buying podcasts at scale, it was podcasts are a little piece, but now it's kind of flipping on its head a bit. I hate bringing up clients in situations like this, but Capital One's been investing in podcasts for 10 years. So that's a big brand spending money in the space. They're serious about it, and we have a whole strategy around that. So I think we're flipping it to an extent. It's not broadcast budgets going to podcast. It's podcasts first, maybe a little social, maybe a little influencer, and then shifting into.
And are you finding that, sorry, I don't mean to.
Please, I'll get off the stage. No, go for it.
Are you finding that Capital One is saying, I actually want to use this particular podcast as a way in and then build a full strategy around that podcast or that podcaster or some version of that?
No, I think they're a very specific case. They like to understand what content is going to be really suitable for them, and they'll build around that. However, with all the efforts that we've made within brand safety, I think we're finding a little bit more opportunity. It's actually what we've been doing with Barometer specifically has allowed us to expand versus detract. So I think that that's another exciting way that we've been able to expand into the space. So finding more and more places that are brand suitable versus using tools like that to exclude. It's really been able to allow us to include instead.
Do you feel like that's because you're speaking to more like performance marketers or brand marketers because of that?
We have such a varied roster of clients that anything I say could be true for any one of our brands. So it's kind of hard for me to limit it like that.
Yeah, we're seeing that on our side too, where it's like kind of depending on who's coming in and whoever we need to educate about podcasts and our offerings is kind of the how we kind of shift the narrative and how we speak to them as well. Yeah.
Well, Billy, I kind of want to throw the original question back to you in terms of the ways in which you're seeing podcast monetization shift. You're probably approaching this specifically from an advertising perspective. What ways have you seen that change just in the last several years?
Well, I think there's multiple ways in which you can purchase podcasts now. It's probably the primary shift, right? I mean, it was baked in host read ads for the longest time. That was the primary. Then there was DAI, dynamically inserted ads, which is obviously a big way in which you can purchase programmatically. And now there's more ways in which you can take programmatic supply and put that into a large pool, which is like what an Art19 does, where you can then, as an advertiser, you're going to reach thousands and thousands of podcasts based on a demographic or some sort of targeting criteria. So I think that's probably the biggest shift in the last several years. What I think is also really interesting is that the door that is now being unlocked from podcasting is not just audio. Obviously, it's becoming multi-format. It's video. It's a lot more than just an audio ad, which is super exciting, super confusing, I think, for the advertiser sometimes. Like, how do I buy this? But really an exciting opportunity, I think, for podcasts to kind of be the way in.
I'd be curious, like the way that you sort of position that is like host read and then DAI and programmatic and sort of unifying the buying process. Is there something that you're looking at right now where you're like, and the next natural step is X in terms of how podcast monetization via ads could evolve in the next year or so? Or a way in which you would want it to?
That's a great question. I can tell you what I think is interesting about it, what I think is potentially cool. I think the opportunity that programmatic offers is, one, to take, again, this large pool of supply, put into a bucket, and then you can break that bucket up in as many ways as you want, depending upon the type of data that you're layering on that bucket. So you could target, males 18 to 34 as an example, where you could target males 18 to 34 in Austin, Texas, that are interested in buying a pair of socks tomorrow. I think that is what programmatic is offering, which I think is really compelling. In addition to that, though, I think there are really unique ways to start leveraging AI and start leveraging creative to be really special and kind of personalized, that can still use the programmatic pipes to be more of an interesting ad at scale, meaning across thousands and thousands of podcasts versus at a one-to-one show level buy. So that, I think, is really interesting. I don't know how to do it. Don't have that as your follow-up, but I just think that's a really fun, compelling way to leverage programmatic in the space as it evolves.
Yeah, the use of AI for creative sequencing is, I think, going to be a massive breakthrough, not just in podcasting, but we have those conversations in the CTV world and across all sorts of different surfaces where you're able to hyper optimize with the click of a button and serve these individually tailored ads and have such good performance. That's something I'm really excited about. Michaela, I wanted to throw it to you for a second. Billy kind of mentioned the sort of multi-platform evolution. I know that's something that you're working on a little bit. Could you tell everyone a little bit about the company that you run, and then talk a little bit about how you're thinking about this multi-platform element and what that means for monetization?
Totally. So we really support from the creator side. And so that means when you look at a creator, they have an entire brand, and that brand branches and stems from podcasting. And then they have their social platforms, their newsletter, then they have book deals, events, all the above. And so I think that we have leveraged and been able to really story tell with that long form piece of content to really grow the creator's entire personal brand. And honestly, I think what the magic is with podcasting is that there's such depth and intimacy and trust that comes with this long form content as a whole. And I think that we've just really leverage the other channels to really grow, the platform, as a whole. And so I think that I get really revved up when everyone's like, oh, audio first or whatever. My thought process is like, hey, this is podcasting, this stem from podcasting. This show, I don't think that, when musicians came out with a song and they decided to do a music video, they're like, why are they doing a music video? But with podcasting, it's like, I feel like it's a wild concept as a whole. And so I think for me, I'm all about us finding ways that we can grow our shows that are by owned media. And we get to do that with social and video forward stuff. So it's very cool.
Can you talk about some of the ways that you've done that maybe with some of the shows like in the portfolio? Like obviously video has become this big element, but maybe a specific or two about we've been working on this multi-platform with this show and we've seen growth from this specific channel.
Oh, yeah. I think that, again, why I think that a lot of these shows, and I know this isn't not like a panel about podcast growth. However, I think that a lot of the reasons why podcasters got into video is because they found a platform that really helped grow. It had an algorithm behind it. And so that's why we tested it out, and it helped us create more of reach to fall down the funnel and to become a top podcast. And we've seen this with a handful of our shows. Shout out to one of our shows, Louisa Nicola. She was just recently on Diary of the CEO. And I mean, explosive numbers that she's been able to do. And within that turnaround time with her show going out on YouTube, it was able to see, I mean, she's top 10, number one in medicine, and then top 12 overall. So it's been incredible to leverage that video format.
Well, and I think this is a theme that we're probably going to return to a few times, which is like the double-edged sword of video. Sorry to have this conversation again, but I know that I think in the podcasting space right now, it's absolutely the center of the universe. Like the benefits, but also the challenges. Maria, from a buying perspective, what does video bring to the table for brands? What do they think about that? How excited do they get about it? But then, what are the challenges that also brings to the table?
That's a tough question. The challenges I'll start with. Actually, I changed my mind. The pros, there's so much opportunity for branding. There's so much opportunity for us to see the excitement of the creator talking about the brand. Just bringing product into the fold there and having people show how they use it, what they like about it, eating it, whatever the case may be, depending on what the brand is. That's all really exciting. And having that opportunity to really lean in with the sponsorships. We love that. We recommend that for our brands. The flip side of the coin is that I think coming from where I sit, and Horizon Media is a privately owned company. However, we are often put in this holdco bucket. And as a result, we're not put in like an extremely DR bucket. So from my perspective, where I'm constantly being asked about performance, video is a problem. I don't, everybody in this room knows all about that. I don't need to explain it, but the way that we usually position things is we'll test and learn over and over and over again until we see who's rising to the top, who are our best performers, who are our hosts that we're seeing the most impact with. And then from there is where we'll say, okay, now we're going to extend into YouTube. Now we want to take advantage of every aspect of what that host has to offer, the social media, et cetera, because I've already tested it. That's kind of stinks just from the lens of we believe it works. So to have to go through all that testing to get to the fun part is a little bit frustrating, but that's really how it shakes out.
Just a question there. Are you, I assume this is advertiser by advertiser, but do you have a preference in terms of like their focal point and what they buy? Would it be video or would it be podcast audio? Like I guess what's like the if that question makes any sense.
I have a preference. I want to do fun, exciting sponsorships, of course. However, it depends on the brand what is going to make sense. If we're talking about a brand that has outside of audio, I think Hital was talking about this earlier today, where you really need to make sure that you're thinking about everything else that's going on with the brand outside of just podcasting. So as an example, if it's a brand that's really heavy digital and really heavy performance driven, then I'm not going to start with sponsorships. I'm going to start with everything that I can measure, testing across all tactics, all of that. If it's a brand that's really leaned into social and really leaned into influencer, then I can say, okay, well, how are you measuring that? How are you seeing, what's your metric of success for influencer? And can I tap into that and get started at a sponsorship level? And then I want to make sure that when we're putting together plans, we're taking into account, does the show have, out of their full audience, is it heavy YouTube? Do they have a really strong social media presence? If so, then I want that piece. I don't want to try to make people be on YouTube that it doesn't work for them. I don't want to try to make people be on social if that's not what works for them. I want to take advantage of what already is working for that creator and lean in.
Can I ask a hypothetical question? What happens if we had an industry where we had more programmatic buys that were being sold by, the agencies that specialized in more performance marketing, and then everything else, your more integrated buys, the cans on desk, integrative, creative concepts, and we ended up working towards finding solutions to test for more, brand lift, all of those KPIs that are needed on more of an integrated approach versus doing programmatic. Can we see a world that it's kind of split that way versus kind of narrowing it down into these silos of YouTube versus podcasting versus audio?
I think yes, but we have to do something about the measurement problem. The amount of conversations I've had about that is exhaustive. I would love to be in a world where I could say, I feel confident about this YouTube multiplier. And until we get to a place where I can say, this is the success we saw on RSS, this is the success we saw baked into YouTube, it's hard to not look at those two things as separate.
Is there a world that we can be tapping into budgets that are more based on storytelling, like a brand founder decides to come on?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
we get asked for that all the time.
Yeah. And then we also see it, convert really well too. And it starts with that long form content and then, baked in more conversation. It's mid funnel, lower funnel conversation versus, I think programmatic is kind of sitting more top funnel and reach, as well as great testing opportunity after an ad's working well. Yeah.
Well, and bringing up programmatic, I think is really interesting. Billy, I kind of wanted to throw it to you a little bit. We've talked a bit about this multi-platform sort of proliferation. Does that open up new kinds of inventory? Does it create new kinds of opportunities? Are these things that brands are actively experimenting with or seeking out? Or how are you thinking about what this multi-platform unlocks in terms of new kinds of inventory?
Great question. How should I answer that? Well, I guess the short answer is yes, of course. It's opening up a lot more opportunity, I think, for the creator to, have more places for their creative outlet to exist and for people to consume that. So absolutely. I think I would be curious though to know, the incrementality or the reach, the incremental reach. If let's just say I was a podcast, audio podcaster first, I was going to ask you this actually, Michaela, if I started in audio, what type of additional, audience am I starting to see? And I'm sure it varies by creator, but that right there is incrementality because that's new eyes or new ears based on this new distribution. So I think it's opening up. I guess to answer your question, yes, it's opening up tremendous opportunity. What I'll say is on our side, the Art19 kind of hosting technology side, it is interesting, but it's also complicated. We were an audio first, platform. We are getting into video and helping creators distribute that video. I think there is really a big opportunity to help the creator community to have one-stop shop. I want to run my business via X, Y, and Z, Art19. I want to be able to push where I want to push. I want to be able to monetize where I want to monetize, and I want to make it simple and offer, quality monetization along with it. So I think that's a whole other exciting kind of aspect to be considering.
When you kind of bring up the audio element, Michaela, I'm curious, you were saying earlier, you think of podcasts just as long form content. Do you think of them still primarily as an audio first product, or is it sort of on a case by case basis, or how do you make that distinction?
No, I think that it's long form opt-in content. I think that the difference is that these audiences are going and finding people and on a weekly basis, they're showing up and finding you on whatever their platform that they're listening or viewing on, and they're showing up. And so that's where I think that we would see so many more dollars come into this space as a whole if we kind of viewed it, in understanding that. I think that when we were prepping for this panel, I use this as an example. I was at home with my kids watching something on Hulu, I think, and then, we all know Rocket Money, right? They spend a lot in the podcast space, and I see a commercial go on, and it's a mock interview that is of a podcast setup, and it immediately makes you stop. But I'm like, because of video, setting that up, creating that trust with an audience, this allowed for this hypothetical mock interview to be distributed on TV. But like podcasting isn't getting the credit for that. But it's because of that visual element that created such that trust and intimacy that allowed for that piece of creative to be able to work. And so if we viewed it like that, we would have more dollars and more opportunities to come into the space as a whole. Yeah.
I'm curious, as somebody who's not quite as enmeshed in the space as you guys are, is that like a heretical opinion? Is it this idea of let's not even think of it as audio first? Like, does that rub people the wrong way?
1000%, because I think why brands came in the space and they saw spend really working is because that host read personal endorsement that was baked in. And again, it was that lower funnel that they saw that conversion quickly, and it was wild, and it like blew up the space as a whole. But then programmatic came into the space and it helped us. Like as somebody that supports creators, like a lot of what we do, it helps our sales team that is vertically integrated. It takes the lift off of them. It helps us test shows. But, the intimacy part of what podcasting is really what converts and really creates that trust that audiences need for, to build community. Yeah.
Well, I'm always curious about how the creators themselves really think about programmatic. And I know programmatic means it's a catch-all term for a lot of different things, but let's just consider programmatic as kind of the pipes that help distribute demand into podcasts.
Yeah.
How do they think about that? I know host read is the bread and butter. It's the OG. It's special. I'm very curious because we are obviously invested in programmatic as a way to help the creative community. So do you think they like it? Like, what can we be doing better?
Oh my gosh, I think that they love it. If they get to show up and they get to just be the talent and work on creative stuff, I think that, I mean, hunting down ad copy for a fresh trade on a weekly basis, it's a tough job. And so I think, again, I would love to work with our agencies for these more integrative, like, Theo Vaughn placing a Celsius can and then showing up in the New York Times. Like, I don't think that the buyers, whoever got that campaign and pulled it together, felt that way. Knew that was going to even happen. But to bring it back to programmatic specifically, like, I think that low lift helps the team that's supporting that creative. And it's also really great to diversify your revenue streams. And that's what programmatic does. And again, for even our smaller creators, it's actually been an incredible litmus test to actually help us understand if we should actually be bringing them to market because of their fill rate. So if we know a show is smaller, they have a great fill rate on programmatic, we then are like, okay, let's go ahead and bring that to market. And, because we don't want to mess up the relationships that we have with our agency partners and the brands coming into the space. Yeah.
Interesting. Maria, I kind of wanted to throw it to you a little bit. You mentioned the measurement challenges earlier, specifically. I know, sorry, it's not a podcast panel if we don't talk about measurement challenges, though. When it comes to YouTube, you mentioned, obviously, you're kind of doing this apples to oranges a little bit type of thing. It's a walled garden, and yet it's this rocket ship that everybody wants to be a part of. How are you thinking about navigating those measurement challenges in this particular moment? And this question, can also go to the other panelists as well. I would love anything sort of as specific or actionable that you can, provide to the audience in terms of here's what we're doing with what we have right now to sort of overcome these barriers.
How am I overcoming measurement full stop, or how am I overcoming measurement with the video aspect of
With the video aspect.
To some extent, we're not. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I don't 100% believe in like a vanity URL promo code world. So for me, it's all of the testing and learning I could possibly do before I get there. So when it comes to what you're saying about programmatic, that's a big piece, because if I'm able to set up test and learn in a really actionable way, it allows me to make smarter choices over and over again. If I say I want to do a test for a brand and I buy 4 shows that are 4 different genres. That doesn't teach me anything. That doesn't tell the brand what worked at all. However, if I buy audiences programmatically and then I buy genres across a variety of different publishers, now I've learned, okay, this is the audience that actually pops for the brand. This is the genres that actually pop for the brand. Now that's going to give me a better guide as to what types of shows should I lean into, what types of creators should I lean into. And it'll help me, like, as I move forward in my test and learn agenda. If I don't have that set up from the start, then I can't figure out what shows are going to work in the future.
I love this approach because it's so smart, and it's so, I think conversations like this really move the industry forward, because that level of transparency to help us all win and make smart decisions, because I think that we all fear of somebody coming into the podcast space and spending money and not working because there's been over promises. It's like not good for anybody. And so I think teeing it up and showcasing or sharing kind of ways that we all can win is just so incredible. For us, even on the talent side, when I'm looking for talent that I know need to kind of convert or see how their relationship is with their audience, I'm going on to, because I think of YouTube as another channel that you can meet and grow an audience on, just like I look at, TikTok. I mean, how many of you, you guys all probably have one friend that has said, oh, I only watch podcasts on TikTok. I don't know. I laugh about it, but we all do. I think it's great. We're probably not talking to that person all the time, but it's like, it helps, having multiple different channels helps the reach and for people to fall down the funnel ultimately to convert. And so when I'm trying to find talent, I'm looking to see how engaged that they are in the comment sections on certain platforms, and also how their community is. And those have also helped me with understanding the trust that's there, to also see if, they're going to convert and if they have the connection with their audience as a whole.
When you're evaluating creators,
Mm-hmm.
do you have metrics as far as like how many different people are engaging with that creator in different ways? So as an example, if you looked at like a Venn diagram of their social footprint versus their YouTube footprint versus their RSS footprint, how much overlap is there between those 3 things? Like, are there individuals that are just like, we don't listen to the podcast at all, but we follow it on social media? Like, how does that shake out?
Yes, and this is where I don't want to hurt any of our shows that have a majority of their audience on YouTube, but that we're kind of like fighting with some of our brands when they only can track our audio only. It doesn't make sense, but their audience is primarily on YouTube, but we can't have that tracking capability. So yes, 1000% we see it. And when we know that there's an overlap, that means that there's worlds that we can grow audience in different areas. But I kind of look at each channel as a new different audience to talk to speak to learn from. And I think that that's what's incredible about podcasting as a whole. Yeah.
When I think sort of the inverse of the opportunity and the possibility that having this multi-platform approach unlocks is the idea that like now you have creators who have to do a lot more work, frankly. I mean, I always think that it's super interesting. Like one of the beautiful things about podcasting from the get-go was it was just such a low overhead production. It was like you get a mic and you're in a room and you have this thing, and it's probably a little bit more complicated than that. I don't have a podcast, but I assume. But nowadays there's so much expected out of it. I mean, I was having a conversation yesterday about we're effectively turning some of these products into television shows. And so the monetization opportunities are, more manifold, but the sort of workload and the cost of production goes up as well. And I feel like that can have a sort of dissuasive effect on people trying to get into the industry, or like really great audio podcasts that try and make the jump and aren't able to. Like, what do you see from like the creators that you work with? Like, is there like burnout? Is the workload unmanageable at any point? And then also, how does it change the economics? I'm really interested in like, if you're going to put a lot more work into a show, you have to make a lot more money to make it manageable. And maybe that math doesn't work out the way it used to when it was audio only.
I will stand on this hill, but I think that a podcaster that can show up and do a always on podcast, they're built different. They're a different type of creator, because it is a lift to show up and to turn out content the way that they do. And I think the difference between television and our shows is the fact that the creator gets to own that content. They get to decide where this content is distributed. And I think that power is incredible. They get to choose the teams that they get to work with. And I would say, and I would also argue that the reason why, podcasters decided to go to video is because they were trying to figure out how can we market our shows. We don't have an algorithm that is pushing these shows out to everyone. So where do we have to go? That's why we're seeing this tremendous growth of podcasting on YouTube is because of that algorithm. And so what did we do? We took the cost that we would have had to spend on PR or a launch party or paid advertisements or cross promos, and we ended up investing it into teams and to video to cut our content, to own it, and essentially push it out to help the reach of social tools and push it out the video and visual element of our podcast to really grow the format. And we all love an additional sense, added to the queue. So I think it's awesome.
Can I share a story? Great. We've got 19 minutes left. This story ends with a sad ending, but it's still a story, and it
Spoiler.
will be relevant, I swear. At least hopefully it'll be somewhat entertaining. I used to work with a podcast called Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, which is a great podcast. And Conan in particular, as this is not going to be a surprise, is a incredibly talented, interesting fellow. And the thing that I always found most special about Conan was no matter what the brand was, Conan gave every host read and gave every integration his all, and gave it his own spin, made it his own thing, made it his own, obviously, him and his own personality. And one campaign in particular that never came to life, that's the sad ending, was a QSR restaurant, quick service restaurant, brand, Wendy's, happens to be Sonam Movsesian's, who's one of his co-hosts' favorite fast food restaurant. And so Conan really wanted to work with Wendy's on behalf of Sona. And his idea was, let's put a Frosty machine in the kitchen of the studio, and every guest that comes to the studio is going to have a Frosty. And I will pull the Frosty for them, and maybe I'll even have my own flavor Frosty, which would have been obviously orange in color. And it didn't come to life, sadly, but the creative approach that Conan took to that, and the way that he thought that could come to life, not just on the podcast, but also on his socials, also on YouTube in short form, was, I thought, one of the most special ways for any creator to think about how they, can lean into a brand and make it feel them, their own, and really bring it to life. So I hope we see more of that sort of thing. Like, I think it's really special.
Yeah, no, I think it is happening in real time. Like, I think that these creators are building brands, and the fact that if there are channels that can support us to do that and to take the pressure off of teams that are supporting it, and like, that's what I feel wins. And I see this, I'm going to use Jake Shane, my therapist, as an example of this. They took a leap of faith to do a Netflix deal. And I think for a creator like Jake Shane, like, his brand overall, like, it makes so much sense for him to go onto a platform like Netflix and decide to, grow his entire brands, and I think that it's almost like with the creator economy, so much new media is going to stem from it, creating so much more opportunities. But I think as podcasts, like, this is where it started. Like, we have so much cool, we're OGs in the space. We should be, honing in on that rather than being like, oh no, we're just this form of, content,
Well, and sort of, again, I'll always bring up the counter argument of whatever we're talking about previously. I'm curious, Maria, I mean, this is almost like a perpetual conversation on some level, but when it comes to buyers and podcast budget and where is that coming from, as we move into this more multi-platform, sort of platform agnostic approach to podcasting, is the budget shifting at all? I mean, is it still, our buyers thinking of it primarily? I mean, Billy asked this a little bit, is it still primarily coming out of an audio budget, or are we starting to see it creep into the video space or the social space? How are buyers thinking about that?
This is a tough one. I think it depends on how agencies are set up. I think my publisher friends want me to go away and to get the video budgets. I'm kidding, sort of. But I think from a Horizon perspective, we have a podcast center of excellence. We have a full audio team that is 100% dedicated to this. So the budgets are coming from clients and going to my team. But I don't think that's the case everywhere by a long shot. There's instances where we'll have clients who are very social focused and they'll be working with our social teams, and our social teams will come to my team and say, well, can you help us? Like, they want to add these podcasts and we don't know anything about that. So the knowledge sharing of being part of a bigger agency, I think, is really helpful from that view. We'll have video people. We have integrated investment teams that will come to my team and say, like, this vendor is pushing this thing. We don't know anything about that. Like, can you tell us what to do? And what we'll do in those instances is we'll either take the budgets from them and plan and execute, or we'll say, okay, you already have these really big partnerships over here. It makes sense for you to keep this budget, but this is our recommendation for how you can make this come to life, or how you can maybe think about certain aspects of it differently than how you normally would have thought about just a video campaign. So it's really, for me, more about making sure that everybody's collaborating, because budgets come from all different places, and we just want to be able to service our brands in the best way possible. So if there's a better negotiation that can be done on behalf of a brand because it's coming out of my video team, then my audio team is going to help Horizon's video team get that over the finish line, regardless of whether we're managing the budget.
Yeah, I've always been curious about that. If you've got your audio budget and your video budget and your display budget, like, do you guys really collaborate on your budgets if you've got the right idea to bring it to life, or are you very territorial about
It depends on what it is. Sometimes I'm not going to be I don't think anybody's accused me of not being transparent. That's my number one thing. We definitely fight over budgets sometimes, but we really do collaborate in other instances. There's some instances that are more obvious than others. Like, as an example, if a digital team already has a huge investment going with New York Times, and then we're working on a podcast budget that they just want, like, the Modern Love podcast, it makes no sense for that to come out of my team. There's already another huge piece over here. Like, let me make sure that we're collaborating with the digital team and getting the most out of every dollar that the client's spending. So yes, we fight over budgets, but yes, we also collaborate.
But I want to also add to it that doesn't it take on average anywhere from like 5 to 7 touch points to actually get somebody to convert? And how many times is that somebody listening to a podcast ad placement, but then going on to social and clicking through right then and there, and we can't attribute it to that. So that's where, again, I think this idea of like omni-channel buying and working with brands to say, hey, what can we do and how big can we build this? I know it can't work for brands just testing out because they don't have the budgets to do that right away. But I think that we're working towards a world that we could do more of those buys. And then also, one thing that we love doing at Pursue is, a brand will come on and do an incredible episode, and that gets clipped and chopped down into social clips. And then there's the whitelisting and usage that can be pushed out onto social. And again, I think that stems from the trust that has been established with the host. It's almost like a personal endorsement as well, and then distributed out onto socials. So performs.
Well, and that's a great segue, because I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit. In the conversation around multi-platform, we've been focusing a lot on video, as is not a surprise to anyone probably. But I'm curious if there are other channels that you're excited about at the moment that you think have potential for monetization capabilities that we haven't really tapped into or fully realized yet. I'm particularly interested. I mean, you mentioned like events is something that I think is still got a lot of space to grow. I'm kind of curious about like live streaming. I feel like that might not be pertinent here at all, but what other channels do you see potential in for monetization?
I definitely think events too. I think Good Wipes is an incredible example of this, where they have decided to really work with creators and test them out on podcast ads first. And then they have decided to go onto social with them. And then they're touring with them when they do their live shows. And I think that we're living in a day and age where we are kind of over how much advertisements that are sent to us on a very frequent basis. And so I think when brands decide to work with almost ambassadors to build these really cool partnerships that go across multiple different channels, for an audience, it means that, it sends a level of this is the authenticity, overall. So that's one area. We have a talent that we are pitching. She's about to go on a book tour. And so to be able to leverage this medium to really share her voice, put her on a stage for her to talk about her book release is a huge opportunity. And again, when we think about growing our creator's entire brand, it's not just monetization on an ads perspective. It's, growing a brand to like sell a book. And even into that, we have some of our creators that are coming out with products because we've seen so many incredible brands come and utilize podcasting because that trust, and they've been able to really find like really lucrative ways to extend and use their audience to build something bigger than themselves.
I mean, I'm just curious, what kind of products are we talking about?
I feel like we're seeing this all the time. I mean, Alex Cooper and Unwell. So think about her products. I think about Mari Llewellyn. She's my co-founder. She owns Bloom Nutrition. So a big way that she was able to paint and tell her story, she was able to hit on that. And she now has an incredible energy drinks, green supplements company. And so we'll explore more of the CPG space and leverage that as well.
I feel like this is almost like we're asking so much of creators on some but I was having some conversation like this the other day where it's like, when you're thinking about potential new shows to bring into the portfolio or to work with, I feel like originally it was like, okay, are they making a great podcast product? And now it's more like, okay, like, are they good on video? And now it's becoming like, could they do a tour? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we're asking for these, creators to be able to have all these different skill sets that it's almost asking a lot of somebody to be able to nail all of those things. Like, but when you're thinking about working with new creators, like, is that a part of the scouting process? Like on some level, like, could they go take this show on the road and like have that? I mean, is that something that you're even like thinking about it in the initial stages?
1000%. It's like a crucial part of why we decided to keep our roster so small. It's very intentional. All of the individuals that are on our roster really represent what Pursuit is about. And they're not only podcasters, they're also doctors, lawyers, nutritionists. And so we kind of look at where they're trying to go and how they're trying to grow. And again, leveraging this long form, intimate, like if you can grow an audience that's opt in that much, they will be a ride or die in another situation. So it's an incredible litmus test for people to be able to scale beyond just online presence.
Well, and then on that note, I want to kind of do a little bit of future facing stuff to sort of wrap a little bit here. Maria, what sort of changes do you see coming to the podcast monetization space in the next, I should say, 6 to 12 months or maybe 2 years? Like, is there something coming down the pike that you're excited about or that you have your eye on, something exciting?
I think that the way that people are looking at content is changing a little bit. To the point you just made, I don't think everybody should be making a video podcast. I think leaning into your strengths and what your audience is looking for is the best way to be engaging. In the same way that, we have athletes, we have celebrities who are podcast hosts. They're not all good. You can be really, really great at basketball and not good at hosting podcasts. So I think you can be really, really great at being a podcast host and not have that translate to video and vice versa. So making sure that you're not just doing it just to do it, because that's what the trend is, I think is important. In terms of like what's next, I think what I'm excited about right now in terms of programmatic is, again, with the collaboration thing, is we're working really closely with our programmatic teams, and I'm making partnerships with publishers that we already work with, but new ones too, where I'm trying to expand what's being bought programmatically outside of those like big players that maybe our digital teams are always thinking of, and including some of the smaller ones, just because you don't have to be SiriusXM or Spotify to have scale. There's plenty of opportunities out there with content that can be purchased programmatically that can be impactful. So I think it's my job as the audio team to sort of represent those publishers and get our programmatic buyers to see those as opportunities, and include them into those plans.
Can I add something really quick? So are you saying that we're moving away from the download, like that it's not just downloads that show if show converts?
I don't think it is. I
Yeah.
don't think it's just downloads
Yeah.
at all.
Okay, love
No.
that. Love that. Love that.
Billy, I'm curious about you. What are you thinking next year? What's on the horizon for podcast monetization, maybe specifically in the programmatic space? What do you see coming in the next 12 months?
Well, I'd say that I hope to see the role programmatic plays in the creators' business become more meaningful to them, and them looking truly at it as this is a foundational opportunity for me to build my business off of. And that programmatic can, like I touched on earlier, there's more creative ways in which we can introduce creative into programmatic so it becomes a more kind of compelling ad product. I think that's one. Obviously, there's more that can be done as far as targeting goes. In Amazon's case, we have first party data that we can use so we can, help drive a better ad, more applicable to the listener, which I think is quite compelling. And I'd say, I know we all stay away from measurement and attribution, but I think there's a lot more to be done as far as measurement and attribution goes, especially multi-format, like multi-platform. And within the players in the space that, are open to that versus some of the walled gardens that make it easier for yourself, I think that's something that's going to change a lot in the next year. And that'll be super meaningful for all of us, because if we can tie our budget back to some sort of performance, whether it's audio or video, it's going to benefit everybody.
Michaela, what do you think? Next 12 months, what are we seeing?
Oh my gosh, I definitely would love additional measurement tools to really help showcase that. We've been working with like listener.com to really show the reach of our more omni-channel approaches, which has been very cool to see. But I'm excited for a more cost-effective brand lift study to be able to be added to the space. So that's, probably a great, $1 million idea right there for anyone. But I think that little tools like that show the impact of podcasting as a whole and that lift when it comes to the brand marketers. And I think that you're going to see a lot more creators decide to come out with products within the CPG space as a whole, and they're going to be leveraging their platforms to do that. Or you're going to see more equity deals where a brand is going to be sign on to the face of something, and that's going to be integrated into all of their podcast spaces that they show up in. So those are a few things I'm forecasting.
Okay, and then kind of finally here, just so that maybe people in the audience could walk away from this conversation and actually go back to their office on Monday and do something differently and say it was worth it to go to that conference. Maria, could we start with you? Like, what's a sort of actionable takeaway that's like realistic and bite-sized that somebody in the space could do next week to maybe make some marginal improvement to their revenue operation?
What can creators? Who am I talking to in this?
Let's say buyers.
I think being smart with brand dollars is difficult, especially when brands come in with, not necessarily the budget that you wanted. So making smart choices about what you're buying and making sure that every single thing that you're doing has an outcome is important. So spreading out what you're buying into a little bit of run of network, a little bit of buying specific shows, a little bit of sponsorships helps you to understand what's working and what's not. If you buy one of everything, then that doesn't necessarily tell you what worked. So making sure that you're setting up your plan, not only to succeed based on, whatever anecdotal knowledge you have, but having that plan be a guide to what you're going to test next is the best starting point.
Okay. And then Billy, what do you think?
I'd say revenue diversification. So think about your business. You can order it in terms of priority however you want, but think there's probably other ways in which you can be bringing new revenue streams into the mix. And whether it's an Art19 who can help do that, or it's, being more creative with bringing new ad formats or events, et cetera, is another way. But I just think generally revenue diversification and being open to that, frankly, I think would be good.
Michaela?
I feel like you kind of stole mine too, because I would say that like having buyers look at the sponsorship structure within an episode, are they over exasperating the how many ad markers are in an episode? Is it oversaturating the episode as a whole? So really look to see how many baked in host read versus programmatic placements, because you don't want to be sharing too much of your voice with other brands and it still has to work.
Awesome. Okay, great note to end on. That's it for the panel, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.